PHP has many features, but they might not be enabled on your server. So it's important to know how to use a function called phpinfo to check your server's configuration. There's a link to phpinfo on the MAMP and XAMPP welcome pages, but I want to show you how to run the command yourself. First of all, you need to locate your server root. This is where all PHP files need to be stored, so they can be processed by the web server. If you installed XAMPP in the default location on Windows, the server root is located at C XAMPP htdocs. In MAMP on Mac OS X, it's at Applications MAMP htdocs. htdocs is the most common name for the server root folder, but WAMP server uses www. So does EasyPHP, and IIS serves web files from CINetPub www root. On remote servers, the server root is usually called htdocs, but public HTML is also very common. Throughout this workshop, I'm going to be using XAMPP on Windows, but it doesn't matter what your setup is. As long as you store your files in the testing server root, you should be okay. Use Windows Explorer or the Mac Finder to navigate to your testing server root. So I'm going to go to C, then to XAMPP and htdocs. Now if you've got a new installation, the server root will have only a handful of files and possibly some folders. In my testing environment though, I've got a large number of folders. By default, the server root supports only one website, and if you want to support more than one, you need to create a virtual host for each site. Creating virtual hosts isn't particularly difficult, but it does involve editing your computer's system files. So it's common practice to create a separate subfolder in the server root for each project, and that's what I'm going to do for this workshop. So create a new folder called Introducing PHP in the server root. Although the Mac and Windows operating systems allow you to leave spaces in folder and file names, you should never do so when naming files and folders in a website. Most PHP sites are hosted on Linux servers, which don't permit spaces in names, and Linux is also case sensitive, so it's best to use lowercase for all file and folder names. Inside the Introducing PHP folder, create another folder called Setup, again using just one word and all lowercase. Open your script editor and create a new PHP file and save it in that setup folder as config.php. Now if the script editor has inserted any HTML code, strip it all out because you want a completely blank file, and then enter the following code: open angle bracket, question mark, PHP without any spaces, and then PHP info, followed by a pair of parentheses, a semicolon, a space, and then question mark, closing angle bracket, and save the page. And now view the page in a browser using this URL: localhost/introducingphp/setup/config.php. You should see a page similar to this. It's a very long page containing details of the PHP configuration on your testing server. If you don't see a page like this, check that your testing server is running. Also, if you're not using the default server port, make sure you add a colon followed by the port number after localhost. If you followed the instructions in the Troubleshooting XAMPP video, the port number is 8080, and if you chose to use the MAMP defaults, the port number is 8888. Other things to check are that your script editor hasn't saved the file in a different format, such as rich text format, or it's added a different file name extension after the .php. If your operating system hides file name extensions, turn on the option to display them. This configuration page contains a huge amount of information, and the contents will differ depending on how your server's been set up. You don't need to worry about most of it, but I'd like to highlight some of the most important points. Right at the very top is the PHP version number. Make sure it's a minimum of 5.2. A bit further down, loaded configuration file indicates the location of the active version of PHP-ini. This is the file you need to edit to change any of the configuration settings. The configuration section, a bit further down, lists in alphabetical order all the features enabled on your server. And a bit further down from there is the core section, which contains several things that I want to check. Display errors tells you whether error messages are displayed on screen. If it's set to off, some errors will result in a completely blank screen, and in a live website that's exactly what you want. Displaying errors can reveal information that could expose you to malicious attacks, but when you're working in a testing environment, it's vital to see all error messages. If display errors is set to off on your local computer, you need to change this setting as described in the video on changing configuration settings. Error reporting a bit further down is a numeric value. In PHP 5.3 or later, it should be at least 32767, as shown here. In PHP 5.2, the value should be 6143, and if error reporting shows a lower value on your system, again you need to follow the instructions in the video on changing configuration settings. The other thing that I want to check is Magic Quotes GPC. This controls a feature designed to add a backslash in front of quotation marks and was originally intended as a security measure for working with databases, but it's proved to be more trouble than it's worth and is scheduled for removal from future versions of PHP. Ideally, it should be off as shown here, but you need to check the value on your remote server and use the same value in your testing environment. Those are the most important settings. If you ever ask for help with a PHP feature not working as expected, the first question you are likely to be asked is whether you've run PHP info to check whether the feature is enabled. Although this page feels like information overload when you first start out, you'll quickly learn to value the insight it gives you into your server's configuration.